on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guest is award-winning cinematographer Adrian Peng Correa. Did I get it right? Adrian? Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Wow, you've got a fascinating backstory. I loved reading about your father and your mother. Can you tell us a little bit about that for our audience? Because it really is fascinating, and it created who you are today and why you're doing what you do. So I think that's really important and very key to why you became a cinematographer. Can you tell us a little bit about each of your parents?
Well, my parents were kind of like polar opposites. You know, my father was a very insular, kind of reserved person who was a tinkerer and kind of a master of all trades. He was the kind of person who could like find out how to put in a toilet main on a weekend and have it done by Monday. And he was very resourceful in that way. And my mother was the complete opposite. She grew up in a small village called Peng in northern Thailand without basically anything, not even running water. And, she was, and of a person who's kind of born out of that life, she, was resourceful in different kinds of ways. She was a very resilient person, but she also had this kind of joie de vivre about her in terms of had this kind of marvelous effervescence about her, and she kind of wore her emotions on her sleeve. And I'm kind of a mix between those two people. And they were both critical to the person I am, and they were both kind of instrumental in terms of the parts I value in myself as an artist, whether it means the technical kind of side of cinematography and photography, or is it the kind of artistic expression and the natural kind of emotional quotient that comes with being an artist is definitely something that comes from my mother. So, it's a healthy balance between them that kind of informs who I am today.
And where did you grow up?
We grew up in a small middle-class town in Connecticut, right along the shore called Milford. My father met my mother during the Vietnam War and then brought her over here. And it was a kind of quiet, modest existence for a long time. We never went on vacations or anything, but the one thing we could afford to do as a family was go to the movies. And it was something that was we never got to go anywhere, but we always got to go somewhere because of the movies. So in that way, it always became a really specific and important release to everybody. And everybody in the family has very different personalities. So everybody would kind of bring certain things to the fore. My father was a big science fiction and fantasy guy. My mother loved visceral movies because she couldn't speak English very well. So horror films and monster movies really appealed to her. My brother Michael was really big into kung fu and action movies, and my brother Anthony was into like more kind of gritty, rough fare, like the Warriors and stuff like that. So I kind of got the basis for all my film education from this really eclectic group of strange people that were the Correas. So it was kind of that my entire life, and it still informs me today because I kind of love everything. I kind of watch everything. So.
And how did that lead you to become a cinematographer?
Well, it was funny. It's something I kind of denied myself, for a long time, because it was something where my father wanted me to be an engineer, and I was studying to be an engineer at the University of Connecticut, which was a good practical career that my father thought was good because I would make a lot of money and I had good security. And after 3 years of trying to be an engineer, I still didn't know what an engineer did. So I eventually failed out of the University of Connecticut School of Engineering. And then I started kind of just being like, well, I can't get any worse than this. So let me just try and find out what I like to do. And I started studying history and sociology and doing very well. But junior year in University of Connecticut, there were these classes on filmmaking. And there was Professor Bob Smith, and I started to take them, and I kind of reacquainted myself, not just with my love of movies and appreciation for them, but kind of the critical way to look at them and think of them as pieces of art and something that were made by human beings as opposed to just something mythical on a screen. And then my history professor, who I was very close friends with, was a huge foreign film advocate. So he would tell me movies to watch, and I would go and rent them from the local video store. And that kind of became my next level of understanding and learning about film, was foreign film from Bob Asher and old classic Hollywood stuff from Bob Smith. And then slowly over the course of that, still photography, which is a big passion of mine, came back to me. And then something really critical happened when I was 21, 20, right around there, was my mother got diagnosed with cancer. And then I graduated because they wanted me to kind of finish school. And then I basically just waited because my mother was terminal, and I was trying to take care of her as best I could with my brothers and my dad. And then when she died, when she was 53, I was 24. And the first thing I could think of was the fact that if I died when my mother died, my life is essentially half over. So what do I want to do? And I saw a documentary called Visions of Light about the history of cinematography. And I became obsessed with cinematography at that point. I said, I owe it not just to my mom, but to myself to live the life I want to live. So I went for it as hard as I could.
What a wonderful story. Taking something that is potentially very tragic and looking at it and learning a wonderful life lesson. So what a gift. What a gift. I mean, we don't always look at death as a gift, but it was a gift. Your mother gave you a gift.
It was her last bit of direction to me in many ways.
And she's watching over you, I'm sure, every day, what you're doing. So how did you break into this field? It's one thing to decide that cinematography is what you want to... First of all, I love cinematography. Without cinematography, I mean, obviously there's no movie, but some movies... the cinematography just comes off the screen, and you're really paying attention to everything. I've been watching The Crown lately. I've been binge watching shows this summer all about England. I don't know why, but I have. And the cinematography in The Crown just blows me away. It's mind-boggling that this is on Netflix, and the quality is just superb. So for you, what makes how did you break into this? Because it's a tough industry to break into.
It very much is, especially without any kind of formal training or resources in the industry or from film school. So I had nobody who went to film school who I knew, and nobody who I knew was in the industry. And also The Crown, shot by Adrian Goldman, amazing cinematographer. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but the thing for me was, at least I was near a big production center. I was within a train ride of New York City.
Right.
So my friend Michael Field was like, "We should just go and try, and maybe you want to go to a small film program." So I went to a small film program for like 8 weeks, and I had already read dozens and dozens of books by that time. So everything I was learning in this class, I was like, I already know this. And what's the point of me just sitting here? And then I met a cinematographer who worked at that training program named Salvador Bolivar. And Salvador basically hired me to come be his camera PA and basically started teaching me cinematography. And then he was going to take a PA job because he didn't have a lot of work. And then he said, "Do you want it?" I could get whatever jobs I could get. And then I just started to build my career, building my contacts and working as hard as I could. After that next job, I got a job on Law and Order as a PA. And then I just started to work my way up. And then I found a kind of way to use a skill of mine to try and get hired, which was, I always loved baking. And if you know grips and electrics and like guys on set, they always everybody loves like cookies and cupcakes and stuff. And I would bake for grip and electric and camera crews, and I would get hired because, he's the guy who bakes stuff. And I would bake stuff for people and I remember this one key grip loved chocolate chip pound cake with vanilla icing. So I would make one for him like every week.
Wow.
And I would keep getting hired based on the pound cake. And then I kept building contacts and baking as much stuff as I could, and it just ends up working because people like with films, when people are on film sets, they're away from home so often that getting just a little touch of that kind of like connective tissue with the person and making a place feel more familial, which baked goods always do,
yes,
ends up making a big impact. And I just kept getting hired, and then just kept working and building contacts and meeting people, and then it slowly started to form after a long period of building relationships.
Amazing. Okay, for anybody who wants to break into the film industry, learn how to bake. That's the takeaway today. Learn how to bake and bake your way into a career.
Another gift from my mother.
Yes, definitely. See? Do you still bake? Yeah. Are you still baking?
Are you kidding me? I just started my show, meeting my friends, my new friends for this show, Love Life. That's going to be for HBO Max and Warner Brothers.
I want to talk about
yesterday,
that.
Yeah. And I went in to meet those people yesterday, and I brought them chocolate chip oatmeal cookies.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, we'll talk about a lot of things. I think. Let's talk about the new, because you're going to be on HBO Max, which was just announced this week, which is Warner Media's streaming service that's launching. When is it? Is it launched already, or is it going to be launching at the end of the year? Is it at the end of the year when they're launching it? But they finally gave it a name.
2020.
2020. Okay.
They finally gave it a name.
They finally gave it a name.
I think it's early 2020 because our show is going to be one of the first shows, I believe.
And you said Anna Kendrick is starring in this. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is, or the show, what it's about?
Well, it's an anthology show, and it's about a young woman, and she's tracked through her life and through her relationships over the course of the season. I think that's about all I can really say.
Okay.
But it's got some really interesting people, and it's the material I've read so far has been really great. So I'm excited to tackle it.
Interesting. Now, okay, so I watched Glow because you did the cinematography for Glow on Netflix, and that's fun. That was a very fun show. If no one's seen it before, It really is. It's again about the movie industry. What were the challenges of filming? Because so much of it is filmed in a ring. It's about female wrestling of sorts, many other things too. But so a lot of it's wrestling in a ring. How did you approach that? Filming that because there's some interesting shots. There really are some very interesting shots. That, of course, I was paying attention to the cinematography as I was watching it. But how did you approach that?
Well, just because I did the cinematography on the second season. First season was done by Christian Sprenger, and then he handed the show over to me. And the funny thing about Glow is that it kind of is an amalgamation of so many different kinds of genres. It has comedy, it has drama, it has the sports element with the wrestling itself. And the funny thing about it is when you're trying to shoot a show like that, you have to have a plan in terms of the way you're going to progress and kind of isolate and highlight certain elements of comedy, drama, and then you have to have an ability to be able to shoot essentially action with the sports elements in the ring with people who aren't necessarily athletes. They're athletic and they train very hard and they work extraordinarily hard, but you're still dealing with actors first as opposed to stunt people. So, using shots that kind of highlight how, like the impact of the action without giving away some of the more safer elements, and being able to give energy and kind of dynamism to the camera in the ring was something that was really critical to us. So Ross Kasha, who's our Steadicam operator, was critical to that. He is incredibly physically fit, and he was able to kind of give us that kind of incredible action and energy in the ring with his operating. And then you build out the context of the action over the course of the coverage. You find pieces that kind of highlight emotions or highlight particular things you want to highlight from a dramatic or an action standpoint, and then they put it together in post in a way that that's still magical to me. So.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. I'm sure you approach each one differently, and we'll get into that in a minute. But if you were just tuning in, you are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And my guest today is award-winning cinematographer Adrian Peng, Correa, and we're talking about how he approaches cinematography. You've worked on feature-length films too, correct?
Oh, correct. Before I did TV, I was in feature films for the better part of a decade and a half. So, yeah, it was a big part of my career for a long time.
What are some of the films that you worked on, Adrian?
A couple of my favorite films I've worked on, I did a horror comedy about what happens to a person after they're possessed, called Ava's Possessions, with a director named Jordan Gallen, who I love very much and is very just a fantastic talent. That was with Louisa Krause, and that's a really, really fond memory. And then there's another film that I did called Night Owls with Adam Polly and Rosa Salazar and Tony Hale. And that's about essentially the moment, if you remember the moment from the apartment when Shirley MacLaine kind of overdoses and Jack Lemmon has to keep her up so that she doesn't OD.
Right.
That's basically the premise. That small premise is kind of ballooned into this story about a young woman who takes a young man to a house and then she tries to kill herself, and the guy has to keep her up over the course of an entire night. And it's basically just two people in a house talking for 90 minutes, but from a comedic and artistic standpoint, it's one of the most satisfying things I've ever done. It's still one of my favorite projects. So.
And how do you approach when you're doing a feature-length film versus a series? And when you sign up for a TV series, are you contracted for every single episode for the year, or are there other people doing some episodes, or how does that all work?
Well, it depends. If it's like a really big, like hour-long show or something that's incredibly detailed and demanding from a production standpoint, they'll often do what's called alternating DPs. So you'll do like the odd number episodes, and another director of photography will do the even episodes. And it just makes things a little bit easier for production so that the director of photography and the directors of those episodes can actually prep their coming episodes while the other group is shooting their episodes. And it just makes it a little bit cleaner and easier, but it also costs more money. And if you're doing something now, for most of my shows, I've been the sole cinematographer, whether it means Glow or American Princess or Rami. I was there every day all season, and that's a little bit more difficult, but it also allows you to have full control over the course of the season. And productions like having cinematographers there because they're the steady hand. They're the person who's there every day, and they can be able to shepherd new directors who come in and maintain the vision of the creators. So in that regard, those are the differences. When it comes to shooting feature films, the thing about feature films is that you're not beholden to a clock, if it's network or if it's a specific time limit for a show, if it's a 30 or a 60 minute show. And then, when you do TV, a lot of times, especially with comedies, you have to make sure that you cover yourself in terms of the edit so that they can cut away lines that they don't think are funny or working, or that they can shave the show down with coverage to be able to fit into a time frame. With features, you really aren't limited in that regard. You can have the freedom to be able to not cover something if you want and tell things simply with one piece of coverage or one shot, or you can allow yourself to have a little bit more freedom in terms of the way you visually express something. Certain shows will allow you, if they're like a single camera show like Fargo on FX, that's a single camera. Those are very specific shots that can only be done one camera at a time. And then you have shows like Glow where they want to be able to cut any couple of lines, and there is such a huge ensemble you need to cover to make sure that you can get everybody's story told. And in that regard, Glow relies a little bit more on the coverage to be able to not only maintain its timing, but also to be able to tell particular stories, give particular stories more weight in the edit if they feel like the show needs to shift in some regard. And features have a lot more freedom to be able to determine their world in terms of the edit, in terms of the running time. It's a little bit more of a different animal in that regard.
When you're working, who are you working mostly with the director? Is he the one who's directing you as far as what kind of shots he wants, or do you have? I'm sure I know you're working with the director, but do you have a lot of autonomy and input about what you think the shot should be?
Yeah, if you're, it really does depend on the relationship that you have with your director, and if you're in TV with your creators. And that's another big difference between film and television, is the fact that in feature films, directors are the ones who have the singular vision. You're making their film, and in that regard, it's a much more collaborative process. But it also depends on the people. Certain directors have complete technical mastery of everything the camera does and have very specific ideas about how to move camera and use it. And other directors who are much more concerned that the cinematographer is able to interpret the visual language of the film, and they're more concerned about the mechanics of the human drama and performance. So it really does depend on who you want to deal with. When it comes to TV, directors who come in and work in TV, they have to deliver the show to the production company and the creators. And if they don't give the creators and the production company the things they need to tell the story in the ways that they want to, then those directors sometimes don't get asked back to come back and direct again. So it's, and the creators and the writers have that kind of power in television. So it is a very different animal for a cinematographer to work with a director on a feature film and then beholden to them and their vision, and then turn that around into television and know that the director is an important part of it. But at the end of the day, the creator and the writers have great sway over the power of the way the material is interpreted.
Do you have a preference between the two? Do you prefer television over feature film or not?
My main thing is that I want to tell stories, and wherever the best material is, wherever the best stories are being told, that's where I want to be. So if I can get a script as good as Ava's Possessions or Night Owls and tell that story on film and a feature, amazing. If I'm working in television and the script, like Rami, has great possibility for social significance and to bring the realization of a family and a religion and people that really haven't been seen that much on TV, then that's an amazing opportunity as well. I don't really particularly have a preference, but I just want to know that I'm telling stories well and importantly, and that people frankly get to see them. It's great to be able to tell stories on film, but if nobody sees your stuff, at the end of the day, you do want the material you're doing to be seen by people. You want it to have effect on people's lives, like the effect it had on me for so many years when I was a young person. I think about those films and the impact they had on me, and I would love to have that kind of impact. I still think about how important shows like All in the Family or MASH were to me when I was younger, and I think about the way movies like Back to the Future and Jaws, when I first saw it in a drive-in when I was 6 years old. I just want it to be impactful, whatever the story is, whether it's something terrifying and unreal and fantastical, if it's something dramatic and completely human and reality-based. I just want to be part of those kind of stories.
Yeah, I totally understand, and I totally agree with you. Do you get things that you turn down?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Of course you do. There's countless times where I've read scripts and I'd be like, I'm not sure if this is for me. And then it goes and wins an award at some film festival and you're just like, But that happens. And it's funny. Usually I have a friend, Stacia, who always tells me that she's like, things happen for a reason. And then out of the blue, whenever I feel like maybe I'm making the wrong choice, something ends up opening. And I can tell you right now, when you work in film and you really love it, the experience is always amazing because the people are usually pretty great. And at least that's been my experience. And I wouldn't trade any film experience I've ever had. It's incredible. And it really is, whenever I think about it, I think about how thankful I am for the fulfillment of being able to live this kind of life, because it really is amazing. It's wonderful.
It's such a pleasure having you on the show. I love talking to people who are excited and passionate about what they do, and it's obvious that you are. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today. If you have just been tuning in, or if you just at the end, my guest today has been award-winning cinematographer Adrian Peng Correa, and we are talking about his career in cinematography. If you have time, go to the Jan Price Show, all about movies, and check out any archive shows that you may have missed, and listen to the Price Movie Minutes, and also check out iHeart's podcast channel to listen to past shows.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
The Yozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Yozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade lush slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Yozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.